Hi, so this is going to be my first video on this new channel I just made on YouTube. Essentially, what I've designed here is a very simple, but I think possibly very useful apparatus for vehicles. It's already been done before. It's actually being used in Europe. It's had inconclusive results. This is just my version of it. The version that I've seen called a dynamic stop lamp in Europe is actually, thought of a little bit differently. There are more things that I want to add to this idea, but as of right now, this is how it works. So this is how the idea started. Essentially, what I was realizing is that it's kind of silly that, no matter how hard you're pressing on your brakes, your brake lights are always the same intensity. So you can never really tell how fast someone's slowing down. You just have to, rely on your depth perception. So essentially, the idea here, this ground wire is actually energized. Well, it would be if I didn't pull the power supply off. That's sitting over there on that guy. But anyway, you know how when you step on the brakes really hard and all your shit, flies forward and, runs into your dash and it's really annoying? Well, essentially the idea here is these different angles here on this ground wire are like 3 different stages of light. Whoop. So essentially, when the deceleration of the vehicle is high enough, it will overcome the acceleration due to gravity of the ball and push it up into the next stage. And it'll then make contact between the ground wire and this copper tape through a screw and then over to the back, where it's just, a couple diodes and, essentially the energy just cascades down. And at the highest level, it's energizing all 3 of these LEDs. At the lowest, it's only energizing 1. So what I was going to do was I was thinking that maybe I could do something like an end switch or a flow or a tilt switch. So I was going to take a tube and put some mercury in it and run some wires through it and expose the wire at different points and then energize it that way. But that was kind of unnecessary, especially when a good friend of mine mentioned that this is essentially just a tilt switch or an end switch. And I realized that in the kit that my wife bought me, I had 3 tilt switches in there. So the way that this guy works is essentially the same principle. So this is your first stage, this is your second stage, and this is your third stage. So the more aggressive the angle is, the more vertical the angle is of the tilt switch, the harder it is for the mercury to actually be pushed up and complete the circuit. So to calibrate this, all you do is you just bend this metal, bend these little wires up, and then it makes it easier for the mercury to actually move up and complete the circuit. So I've got, just 3 little LEDs. It's really just, for demonstration purposes, but it does work to an extent. And it's pretty, there's no brains. This is just a power supply, hooked up to a breadboard with 3 tilt switches. Now, the next step was this, essentially using, the fancy shit, using an Arduino with an MPU 6050. And it, what's cool about it is that it's all pretty much just clever little tricks. So by my understanding, all that this is, the MPU 6050 does, is it's just a little ball in a small chamber with a piezoelectric crystal. And essentially a piezoelectric crystal produces a voltage based on how much pressure is applied to it. So with a lighter, well, not a hand lighter, but like a grill lighter, when it's like got that click, that's a piezoelectric. So it's actually creating a spark based on the pressure that you're putting on the piezoelectric crystal. So essentially that MPU 6050, which they use to balance drones and a lot of other really fancy equipment, this application of it is very simple. All that you're doing is you just have these in a bunch of different directions, and you're just pulling in all that data, different voltages coming off of this, and in that way you can actually sense motion. So from here, like I said, I moved on to an Arduino and MPU 6050, and this is what I came up with. And yeah, it's just a plank of wood. It looks like shit, but it does work. So essentially, that's the MPU 6050. It's oriented that way. It needs to be, at least the way that I programmed it. And essentially what I've done is, back here in the trunk, I've actually intercepted the 12-volt signal to the brake lights. So essentially, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually simulate deceleration of the vehicle by tilting this, because like I said, it's just a little ball in a chamber. So that little ball in the chamber is pushing up against that crystal, giving a different voltage, and then I have that correlated to different circuits that are lighting up different lights. And here you can see the relays are lighting up as well. And if I'm actually pressing on the brake, then there will be 12 volts pass through these relays and to these lights that I have hooked up in the rear window here. Now, right now, I only have this side hooked up, and one of them became desoldered. It's a pain in the ass to work back there, but anyway, the general gist is just that, you know, at a certain threshold, this one will turn on, 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 and then at a certain point, this top one will. So essentially, it'll on both sides come up and into an arc. Now, in Europe, they're using it with their dynamic stop lamps. They're actually putting in a strobe effect, which I think is probably a great idea. There are some regulations here in the U.S. against that, but that could probably be, dealt with. Now, just to demonstrate my trusty Kuka here. So here you can see we're actually hitting the brake. Now, if I tilt this, all right, let's try that again. Anyway, you see, here I'm lighting up these lights here in the back because we have the brake light actually engaged. So this would essentially, by intercepting that 12 volt signal to the brake light, you would prevent, accidental activation, if you're going over bumps or whatnot. And essentially it would only actually light up these additional brake lights if you're actually already using the brakes. Now, what I'm imagining is essentially like an aftermarket type deal. This would be pretty simple, if I could obviously clean this up because it looks like hell. And actually, just have a cleaned up product. Just a single device. An auto mechanic, they could pretty easily install this. All it would take is it would just take, the device being oriented in the proper direction and then intercepting the brake light, and it would work. So essentially that's the idea. Really, the only reason why I'm making this video, it's essentially just because I feel like, this idea could actually, possibly help people prevent crashes, save lives, prevent injury. And I think that, it's a situation where it's been had before. It's been implemented by Volvo and Mercedes. But it hasn't caught on. People haven't, been trained or learned enough about it, for it to actually, produce conclusive results that it does help people. And I think that it could just get another fair shake at it. It could be worthwhile to try again and see if it is worthwhile. Anyway, yeah, that's my idea. It's not my idea. It's been had before, but this has been my progression with it. I would be very interested to hear what anyone has to say about it. Any, contributions, criticisms, whatever. And just, whether or not you think that it's worthwhile, and whether it's worth me, taking it to the next step and trying to create something aftermarket, for people to install in their cars that that already exist, and not just the newest greatest cars have it. Any car could be outfitted with it. And honestly, the way that this would work is it would be strength in numbers. So the more people that adopted it, the safer everyone would be. So anyway, I'm Dustin. That's my video, and thank you.